It's great to welcome back to the program attorney Mike Papantonio, host of America's Lawyer on Ring of Fire. The new book is Suspicious Activity, a legal thriller. You know, Pap, I love the genre. I love legal thrillers. I love the books in general. With yours, it's obviously fiction in the literal sense, but you're touching on topics that are real issues. And in this book, one of the topics is banks and the requirements or lack thereof on banks to know who they're dealing with when it comes to what sorts of violence or terrorism they could be funding around the world. So can you just talk a little bit about the background of this as a real world concern and what banks get up to?
Yeah, as David, all of my books are based on 6 books, 7 books written about cases that we're actually handling. But I take those cases and I put them into a fiction setting, as you know. But in this case, this is the HSBC case. So that's the kind of the center notion of it. HSBC was caught washing billions of dollars for terrorist organizations and drug cartels. The Obama administration caught him. Eric Holder clearly caught him, made him sign a 16-page document. Yes, we washed money. Yes, we made billions of dollars. Yes, we knew what we were doing was going to result in the death of human beings, but we did it anyway. Now, they were made out of the billions, tens of billions of dollars they made. They were required to pay a $1.6 billion fine. Nobody went to jail. Very typical of the white collar industry. Nobody goes to jail. They don't, I guess they got a Harvard education, they're Armani suits, MBAs, you name it, and they don't look like criminals, so we don't throw them in prison. That got my attention. We handle thousands of cases for people who have been the victim of that. There's several organizations that have bound together to say, look, we need to kind of stick together in all this, and we need to make the government do what they're supposed to do, which is go after the terrorists, go after Hamas, because they are the number one terrorist organization in the world, by the way. And we need to be able to say that we can trace their money from the bank that washed it for them all the way down to the roadside bomb. So the facts in that book are 100% accurate. They're 100% true. And all I've done is taken those facts and put them into a fiction. But the truth is the banking industry has no regulations. I mean, we think they do. You've got folks that one day they're working in the business of regulating, and the next day they're looking for their next big job. So they don't really regulate. They pay lip service to it. They're told, look, Joe, I know you're making $200,000 a year, but if you can give us a break on this, how would you like to make $500,000 a year? So it is that revolving door. It's useless. Media doesn't touch it. Media barely touched the HSBC story. They have barely touched the terrorism story in the United States with the banks washing terrorism because banks and their affiliates advertise big time in the media. MSNBC, CNN, ABC, they're not going to do these stories. They're going to kill the story before it ever gets on the network. So if we don't do something as lawyers, nothing happens. Fortunately, we're getting really good results for these people that have lost arms, they've lost loved ones, they've lost their eyesight in roadside bombs. We're getting results for them. It's a slow process. And this book talks about how the government is actually interfering with that process, how the DOD is actually making it more difficult for the very people that fought for this country to even be paid money. So there's a lot of parts to this book, Suspicious Activity. The story's told on many different levels.
Yeah, and the regulatory capture you describe, I mean, anyone who's followed the Sackler fiasco knows about the FDA employee who was involved in the approval of OxyContin, who subsequently went and a couple of years later ended up working for the Sacklers or Purdue Pharma, an affiliated company. The other story here that you mentioned, to go back to the regulation part of it, it seems like, as is the case in many areas, there's a disproportionate focus on small players at the exclusion of some of these big bad actors. An example with banking would be, you deposit over 10,000 bucks and you get on a list. There's suspicious activity reports. If you go in and deposit 9,000 bucks a few times, you might be structuring deposits to deliberately circumvent the 10 grand thing. You're talking about billions here. What are the regulation? What requirements do banks have now to understand the provenance of the deposits that they accept?
Well, it's very clear. I mean, whether you're HSBC or Wells Fargo local bank, you have a duty. The term suspicious activity, it's called suspicious activity reporting, SARS. Very common term you see in the banking industry.
Yep.
But what the bankers do is hustle all of that. They make it so subjective that there really is no real control over what's really being reported. In other words, a banker may say, somebody at ground level may say, this doesn't look right. I don't know why all this copper wire is being sent to this charitable organization. Doesn't make any sense to me. And then the guy above them says, nah, we're not going to report that, because if we report that, the regulators are going to come down on us more often. So, I mean, it's just a hustle. And you mentioned the fact, why do we see the small banks being victimized and the big banks get away with it? It's because this year, the Department of Justice made this wonderful proclamation about how many white-collar criminals they're prosecuting. It has never been lower. This administration has prosecuted fewer white-collar criminals than have ever been prosecuted in the last 10 years. And they're declaring a victory because they go after mom and pop organizations rather than going after the big organizations like HSBC, or, as you point out, in the opioid case, which, as you may know, I handled that case.
Yep.
They didn't go after they didn't go after the Amerisource Bergens and the McKesson folks. They went after the small players. And even the Department of Justice in that case, just to point out, to make a point here, in that case, David, the Department of Justice had everything they needed to prosecute these folks, top to bottom, 150 people a day dying. They had everything they needed, and they decided, no, let's not do it. Not one person was prosecuted. Not one person went to jail. Same thing with this case that we're talking about here with the banking industry. Nobody gets prosecuted. Nobody goes to jail. And so in this case, with the book Suspicious Activity, you'll actually see the underpinnings of how the government is actually working against the best interest of these claimants who are saying, look, I lost both legs on a roadside bomb. We know Hamas was responsible. We can trace the money right down the line from HSBC.
The broader conversation about how corporate entities provide legal protection for those that are involved is a very long-lasting and big discussion. I mean, we talk about the 2008 crisis and the avoidance of prison for essentially everybody involved. We've talked about it in opioids. We're talking about it here. This is kind of the point. I mean, let me see how I can frame this question to get your thoughts on it. One of the big advantages, if I go to a lawyer and I say, hey, let's please create an LLC for me, create a C corporation. One of the first things lawyers will say is, this will give you protection from A, B, C, D. If someone wants to come to you, they have to pierce the corporate veil first. So this is like a selling point for these corporate entities. And one could argue on some basic level, it makes sense that for certain types of disputes through a business, they shouldn't be able to come and take your house. Okay, we can probably all generically agree with that to some degree. On the far side of the coin is what you're talking about and what you include in the semi-fictionalized version in Suspicious Activity, etc. Whereas people, we all look and we say, has this gone too far? Has the ability of corporate entities to protect people from personal liability gone too far? How do we square or balance these two?
Yeah. Let's not miss the fact that the Supreme Court in Citizens United basically demanded that we treat a corporation as a person. Okay. If most of the cases that I work on, David, no exaggeration, I'm sitting across the table from a CEO who is an absolute psychopath, at the very least a sociopath. And if I had a DSM-4 or 5 with me right now, I could be checking off all the qualities of a sociopath. All right. That person is allowed to operate in this thing that we've created, this corporate protection that we've created, and we say, well, we can't put a corporation in jail. Well, bullshit. We can put the people who made the decisions in jail. I can name the 8 people that were most responsible for the opioid crisis, and I can show you the documents that lead to them being responsible and to where a good prosecutor could easily put them in prison. Same way with this, same way with the money washing, same way that we saw with the PFAS case or human trafficking, all these stories that I've written about over the years. I can point to exactly who made the decision, but there's this legal fiction that it's a corporation. And even though we want to call them a person, if they're psychopath corporation, we treat them differently. If they're a psychopath capable of murder, like we saw in the opioid crisis, we give them a pass because of this legal fiction that you're talking about, the LLCs, the protections that they have. But it's laziness, David. It's laziness by the prosecutors. If the prosecutors wanted to do their job, they could. In the Department of Justice, you have 2 things happening. You've got the career prosecutors who don't really care. They're going to get paid whether they go after the big case or not.
And they want a high win rate, I assume.
That's right. They won't take any chances. Every case I just talked about, opioids, PFAS, the human trafficking problem, this issue that we're talking about with bank washing, every one of them, a good trial lawyer could go after the people at top and put them in prison. Okay? But in the Department of Justice, you have these folks that they're there for life. Why worry about it? Or you have the folks that are looking for their next job. You follow me?
Yeah.
Why would I prosecute a corporate polluter? Isn't it easier for me to say, well, Mr. DuPont, listen, if I give you a break, just remember that, because I'm going to be looking at a job 5 years from now. So the system is broken, and I would love to say that there's a quick fix to it, but there's not. And I'd love to say that I could lay out a path that would change things. One thing that would change things is to have an attorney general that has some damn guts.
Right.
An attorney general, unlike Garland, who has enough sense to understand that it all starts at the top. If you don't perp walk these people, like in this book, Suspicious Activity, that we're talking about here, I say again and again, here's how you do this. You perp walk them. And then the next generation of folks at MBA in Harvard, they say, we better not take any risks like we're doing here with this banking scam that we're running, because we might go to prison. But until you perp walk them, David, nothing changes. And until we have an attorney general that will do something, and we haven't had one for as long as I can remember, to be very honest with you, an attorney general that has enough courage to do their damn job and make sure the Department of Justice does what they're supposed to do, the FBI does what they're supposed to do, and all these government agencies coalesce to go after the folks that are destroying the justice system in this country.
The book is Suspicious Activity, a legal thriller. We've been speaking with attorney Mike Papantonio. Pap, always appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, David.